If you're watching this video, that means you probably drafted at least one fantasy team so far, but that doesn't mean you're done improving your team. Because I see a lot of people who drafted the wrong running backs, because there's a ton of good ones on the waivers right now, and in this video, we'll talk about the 5 that you should be looking to add in your leagues right now. And we are starting with Khalil Herbert, the running back for the Chicago Bears, who is available in over 70% of leagues right now. And look, I know what you might be thinking. Khalil Herbert, what the heck? I've heard nobody talk about this guy. Exactly. It hasn't been the best offseason for Khalil Herbert, because look at this right here. The team ended up adding DeAndre Swift in free agency. And not only did they add DeAndre Swift in free agency, he was the first free agent signed not just by the Bears, but by any team at any single position. Let's go back here on Spot Track and we can look at his exact contract. The contract they gave him wasn't cheap at the running back position. 3 years, $24 million, about $8 million per year. And we're talking about guaranteed money. You got $14 million guaranteed. This is not backup running back money. This is starting running back money, which means that a lot of people are assuming, okay, DeAndre Swift is a starter here until we got to the preseason. But before we get to that preseason usage, let's just look at this depth chart right here. You have a second-year player, Roschon Johnson, who can pass, protect, and catch passes. You have DeAndre Swift, who's getting the money, coming off of a couple of decent seasons with the Lions and Eagles behind some solid offensive lines. But Khalil Herbert himself, this guy right here, might be the most efficient runner out of any of them, and I think he probably is. And then the first week of the preseason came, and these snaps are courtesy of PFF and Nate Yonke over there, and you can see right here, Herbert with the starters. They play 20 snaps, that's this number down here. He plays 14 of those snaps compared to just DeAndre Swift playing 2. Now here's the thing, DeAndre Swift started, played a snap, but then Herbert came in, and this was the usage. Herbert saw 70% of the snaps in 9 carries, while Swift saw just 10% of the snaps in 1 carry with that starting Caleb Williams unit in the first preseason game. So this is extremely interesting usage, but it's not enough on just 20 snaps to draw any significant conclusions, especially since Roschon Johnson was out for that first preseason game. Okay, so now the second week of the preseason comes, and this is the usage that we get. Again, this is courtesy of PFF and Nate Yonke. You see 9 snaps with Caleb Williams in the starters, and you get Khalil Herbert playing 6 of them, playing 2/3 of the snaps in this game, handling all 3 backfield carries. But once again, we do not have Roschon Johnson in this game, and even DeAndre Swift sat with what many people were saying was a little bit of a banged and bruised injury. So once again, we don't have a clear shakeout on this backfield, but the one consistent piece that we're getting is Khalil Herbert with the starters. Okay, maybe we'll get some clarity in the third preseason game where that wasn't the case at all, because as you can see right here, the quarterback that started this game was Tyson Bagent. So the starters did not play in this game, and as you can see right here, the running back was Travis Homer, the 4th string running back, meaning that we did not get DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson, or even Khalil Herbert in this game. All 3 rested, which means, in my opinion, all 3 are going to make the team, play week 1, and by the time you're watching this, that's probably true. So out of the preseason usage, we can't take it as gospel, but what we got was Khalil Herbert looking good, seeing the majority of the work, and yes, he did not get the money that you saw for DeAndre Swift, but if we look at the past success that Khalil Herbert has had in his last healthy season in 2022, he was 5th in true yards per carry, 7th in yards per touch. You scroll over to his juke rate, that's his broken tackle rate, ability to break tackles, pick up yards after contact, 7th in that category. He was one of the most efficient running backs in 2022, got banged up last year, so did a lot of that backfield. Now he enters this year kind of as a sleeper on the waiver wire in over 70% of leagues. In my opinion, he needs to be on more rosters, because in week 1, if it looks like he's the guy, he's not going to be available anymore. Your league mates are going to spend a lot of money on him. You might as well pick him up now before the season starts. Now, the next man I want to talk about is Keaton Mitchell, who's available in over 90% of fantasy leagues right now, and I get it. Here's the thing. This guy's on the PUP list. It came out official. You can see the tweet on the screen from Underdog Fantasy. He's going to miss at least the first 4 weeks of the season, but we already knew this. Now, the reason why he's on the PUP list, and we can go to the injuries here from Player Profiler, he had a hamstring, but the big one was in week 14, so late in the season, he tore his ACL, which on average is a 9 to 10 month recovery for these running backs. That's right in line with where he'll be. They put him on the PUP list to be safe, so he'll be back around week 5, maybe week 6, but here's the deal. You could just pick up this dude and put him in your IR spot. He's available in over 90% of leagues. Just pick him up and put him in your IR spot right now, because he's one of the most valuable pieces you can put in an IR spot. This guy was literally Devon Achane light last season. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry. That led the NFL more than Devon Achane. 8.7 yards per touch. Led the NFL more than Devon Achane. Was breaking a tackle on 30% of his carries. Top 10 in the NFL. I mean, Keaton Mitchell, he's a smaller running back. He's coming off of the torn ACL. I get it, but he was extremely dynamic in the league's #1 rush volume offense last year in Baltimore. And as I've stated, he's available in over 90% of leagues on Yahoo right now. You can see him right above my head right here. This number right here means he's only 9% rostered, available in 91% of leagues. And my guess is with that news that he's going to be on the PUP list, it's going to make even people who have him on their roster a little bit more skittish. They'll drop him, pick up somebody else. Just put him in your IR spot, people. It's the biggest advantage you can get right now. Pick this guy up, put him in your IR spot. Because as a brief reminder from last year, he didn't play the start of the season. He was hurt to start last year too, and he was still productive once he started getting some carries. You can see right here, he only had 9 carries on 16% of the snaps in week 9, his debut. And what does he do out there? He puts up 134 yards. He puts up a top 5 fantasy finish right here with 20.4 points. The next week he comes up and he backs it up again on just 4 touches, 3 carries, 1 catch. The dude has over 60 yards, a touchdown, and 13 fantasy points. A top 20 running back. He's that good on a per touch basis. You know, everybody wants Devon Achane in round 2. I get it. Achane has a better role and is healthier than Keaton Mitchell, but Keaton Mitchell is that dynamic as well when out there. This is not a guy that I'm going out of my way to draft at all in fantasy leagues because, again, he's available in over 90% of leagues. Just pick him up. The dude who is a little bit smaller, yes, but he makes up for it with his speed at 4.37 speed. And here's the thing. Derrick Henry's the RB1 on this team. Even when Mitchell comes back, Derrick Henry will still see the 14 to 15 to 16 plus carries. But all Keaton Mitchell needs is 6 touches a game, 7. If he starts getting 8 to 10, he's a home run pick that you can just put in your IR spot. Now, before we get into this next guy who's somehow available in 50% of leagues, even though he's a starting running back in the NFL and has a nice matchup to start the year, do you want to win your fantasy league? As simple as that. If so, well, click this button right here. There's a link in the description below, and you can get my fantasy blueprint absolutely risk-free this year through our 2 partners below. Now, here's the deal. What does this mean? What is the fantasy blueprint? What is risk-free? Let me explain. The fantasy blueprint is a tool that you can use if you still have a draft. It can help you with the draft, but every single week of the season, I'll be sending you tools daily to help you with the waiver wire, your rankings for that week, your matchups, all these things and more. And as my website says right here, if you don't make your fantasy playoffs, I'll refund your one-time payment of just $10. This is absolutely risk-free. It's a one-time payment of $10 for the entire year if you sign up through one of our partners. You don't make the fantasy playoffs, no questions asked, reach out and I'll give you that refund. So to join over 15,000 other people who have access to tools that I use for all of my leagues, just scan this QR code on the screen right here or click the link in the description below. And by the way, one of our partners for the blueprint is Underdog, and they have this crazy play for Travis Kelce for the first game of the year. All he has to do is have 1 yard, 1 receiving yard, and you win this play. Now you have to pair it up with another play in order to make the entry, and I paired it up with Derrick Henry to score a touchdown. So if this happens, I get over 3 times my money. You could take this exact play as well. Even if you don't even want the blueprint or you already have Underdog, just make sure you know about that. That is our blueprint partner, Underdog, that free Travis Kelce play. It's worth taking. All right, now that guy that's currently available as I record this video in 51% of fantasy leagues is Chuba Hubbard, which is crazy to me because look, this dude is a starting running back to open the year. And I know what you're saying. Sal, you're a con. You said you like Jonathan Brooks. I do. Both things can be true. As you probably know by now, Jonathan Brooks will be on the PUP list, meaning he'll miss at least the first 4 games of the season. That's all I expect him to miss, but this has already been expected. A month ago, his own head coach said that he's probably going to miss 3 or 4 weeks. It's what they expected. It's his timeline. He wasn't going to play in the preseason and get ramped up to start the season. But a lot of people weren't paying attention to that, and Chuba Hubbard right now is still available in over 50% of leagues. Heck, even if by the time you're watching this, he's only available in 30 to 40%, you need this guy in your team. Because yes, if we're talking for the entire season, I do prefer Jonathan Brooks, the 2nd round pick out of Texas, who can do it all, can pass protect, catch passes, run, has the size for the red zone. I prefer him throughout the whole season over Chuba Hubbard, but he's not going to be there for the first 4 weeks. Why not get a starting running back on your team that's currently on the waivers and has a good start to the season in terms of his schedule? And we'll talk about that schedule in a second, but here's the deal. Chuba Hubbard is the clear running back 1 on this team. He played ahead of Miles Sanders in the preseason, according to PFF snaps and usage, and Nate Yonke put out a nice article over at PFF. Hubbard played 83% of the starter snaps compared to just 17% for Sanders. He's the RB1 for this team, and here's the deal. Last season, over the final 7 games of the year, Chuba Hubbard was a top 10 fantasy running back. And even as I've expressed my interest for Jonathan Brooks this offseason, I still said every single time that Chuba Hubbard was a quality back these past 2 months or so. He has nice size at around 210 pounds now. He has quality bursts, as you can see right here, 66 percentile burst, decent speed for his size. And if you go back during his time in college in 2019 at Oklahoma State, a lot of people forget this. This dude had nearly 2,100 rushing yards alone, over 300 carries. He could be a full-time back. Some people say, oh, he's only 210 pounds. He can't be a full-time. No. He's done it before. He could do it again. He did it literally last year, the final 7 games. And not for nothing, he's going to be on an improved team. I think a lot of people don't like taking Panthers players because they remember how bad they were that last year, although they have a new coach in Dave Canales. They upgraded their guard position with veterans Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, arguably the most improved offensive line up there with the Jets. They had Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, a first-round receiver. This offense is going to be better. Bryce Young, in his limited sample in the preseason, looked better. He has better coaching. He has a better supporting cast around him. That's going to help everybody, including the starting running back for the first month of the season, Chuba Hubbard. Now, earlier I brought up their schedule, and this is a pretty good schedule to open the season for a guy who's going to at least start the first 4 games of the year. You can see right here, he's going to be facing bottom 10 defensive lines in the Saints that have an aging defensive line with no real standouts overall. Linebackers, sure, but standouts in the defensive line. Bottom 10 defensive line. And then he also is going to be facing the Chargers, who you can also argue have a bottom 10 defensive line. You know the names in the defensive line, like Bosa and Mack, although these guys are aging. Mack had a good year last year from a pass rush perspective, but in terms of run stop, these are a nice first 2 matchups against the Saints and the Chargers for Chuba Hubbard. So to sum this all up, you get a starting running back who showed as recent as last year that he can produce in the NFL in a better environment, and he's available on waivers as I record this in 51% of leagues. By the time you're watching this, that might dip to like 45%, 40, still add him. And then consider adding the rookie out in Buffalo, who's available in over 90% of leagues right now, which I think is absolutely crazy, and that's Ray Davis. Look, there's a good chance at some point this year, it could be be as soon as like week 3 or week 4 that Ray Davis is the red zone back for the Buffalo Bills, top 5 offense in terms of projected points, and becomes a must-add in fantasy. Now, for a little background on Davis, you can see he was a Bills pick out of Kentucky right here, the 28th pick in the 4th rounds of the drafts, and he honestly landed in a pretty sneaky spot in terms of an offense that is still, even though they lost Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis, top 5 in projected points on a team that has a thin backfield if you talk about depth. Because we know James Cook is there, and he was great last year in his first year as seeing a larger role. The dude had like almost 1,500 or 1,500 total yards. He was dynamic. He was 4th in overall rushing yards. But outside of that, there's just Ty Johnson, who's still in a competition reportedly with Ray Davis. Johnson was solid down the stretch last year for the Bills, but the 4th round pick, the fact that they invested a 4th round pick in a reliable player like a Ray Davis who can kind of do it all. He can catch passes, pass protect, and work inside the tackles, especially in the red zone. I think he's going to be ahead of Ty Johnson to start the season as the RB2. Now, as I mentioned, James Cook should be the clear-cut RB1 for this team. There's no doubt about it. You can see right here between his rushing and receiving yards, he had nearly 1,600 total yards last year. And if you're talking about just how effective he was, well, he was 15 yards per touch last year, as you can see right here. You can see here as well on the ground, he was 12th in overall yards per carry. He was efficient. He was effective. But the one area they did not like to use him all that much or as often as some other RB1s was the red zone, which kind of makes sense because he's only a 200-pound back. These are the Bills' carries in the red zones last year for their running backs. It doesn't include Josh Allen. James Cook did lead the way with 29 attempts, but look at this. Latavius Murray, 20. Damian Harris, 6. You had Leonard Fournette with 4 and Ty Johnson with 5. So all the other running backs combined for more, especially Latavius Murray and Damian Harris combined for the same or more carries than James Cook. They were bringing in these older veterans, bigger backs is the key piece there compared to James Cook. Cook earned just 4 goal line carries last year and ranked 22nd in red zone opportunities on his 280 touches. And now neither of those running backs, those veterans, Damian Harris, who retired, Latavius Murray, not currently with a team, neither of them are on the Bills anymore, which opens the door for another running back to take over the usage in the backfield, in the red zone at least, over James Cook, assuming he does not see an expanded role, which they seemed hesitant to do last year. And that's where you can get this good mix of Ray Davis, who not only has solid experience in the red zone during his time in college, but also was a quality pass catcher as well. Davis ranks 2nd amongst all the rookie running backs in best season reception share and was top 5 in yards per team play. All those stats basically sum up that this guy was leaned on in the passing game in college and was effective when leaned on. So you can expect the role maybe as quick as week 1 for Ray Davis. I'm not expecting a lot here, maybe 20-30% of the snaps, maybe 3-4 carries, but red zone usage, and that should get ramped up assuming he does not fumble, which he didn't do it a lot in college. And as they start to earn some trust, this could be the red zone back for a Josh Allen-led offense, and that's valuable. Now, this next guy is available in 95% of leagues, but before we get there, nearly 70% of you are not subscribed to this channel. I get it. I barely subscribe to half the people I watch, but when they tell me to, I do because I appreciate their work. So if you can just hit that subscribe button, my goal is to get that to as close as 50% as we can this year. It really goes a long way. The more people that subscribe, the easier it is for me to get even more content out for you. So if you find this helpful, hit subscribe. Now, that running back who's available in, as of right now, 95% of fantasy leagues is the 5th round pick for the New York Giants, Tyron Tracy. And look, I think this is a big mistake to leave him on the waivers in that many leagues. Tracy comes into the NFL as a transitioned wide receiver. He played about a year and a half in college as a running back, but he was great when he actually transitioned to that position. Damn, transition to that position. Those are some bars. But as you can see right here in 2023, he had only 113 carries. Okay, that's fine. He doesn't have a ton of work on his legs, if you will. No big workloads. 716 yards. Here's the important thing. He averaged over 6 yards per carry. In his first year as a full-time running back, led the entire Big Ten in yards per carry. And then this dude shows up to the NFL Combine, and courtesy of Player Profiler right here, he runs a 4.48 40 time, shows elite burst, almost 193rd percentile burst, 96th percentile agility. So he shows he's an elite athlete. He was a dynamite player in college, and he also has nice size at about 210 pounds, meaning that he could handle a full workload. He's not just like a satellite back entering the NFL, but he's not going to have to handle a full workload right away based on where he landed with the New York Giants, because this team signed Devin Singletary, a veteran running back who's now reconnected with Brian Daboll, his head coach for 3 years during their time together in Buffalo. Brian Daboll really likes him, and Devin Singletary got almost $10 million guaranteed, so he's definitely going to be the starting running back for this team, but there was really no RB2 depth. Let me go back to this page on Player Profiler here. The RB2 depth, Eric Gray, who struggled as a rookie, a late-round rookie. Jason Corbin hasn't really been involved at all. We can go down a little bit more. Dante Miller, don't even know who that is, honestly. So Tyron Tracy looks to be the clear-cut RB2 on this team, and the preseason usage even backs that up. Because in the first preseason game, Devin Singletary didn't play, and with the starters, as you can see right here, the starting unit, Tyron Tracy, courtesy of PFF and Nate Yonke here, had 11 snaps snaps out of the 13 with the starters, compared to Eric Gray just having 2, and Tyron Tracy handled all of the carries, which just basically indicates that he is well ahead of Eric Gray as the RB2 on this team. And that basically checks out with all the hype that we were getting out of Tyron Tracy, who did have a little bit of a scare with an ankle injury, but he's completely fine now entering the season, and all that hype came from training camp. So as I mentioned, Devin Singletary will start the year as the RB1. There's a good chance that he's probably going to be seeing 14 to 15 carries a game, and maybe Tyron Tracy only gets like 4 or 5 touches a game, but I expect Tyron Tracy behind a bad offensive line. The Giants have one of the worst offensive lines, if not the worst yet again in football. I expect Tyron Tracy to be used out of the backfield as a pass catcher, since he's a former receiver as well. And that's probably where he can get on the field right away, because Devin Singletary is probably going to be leaned on early downs, might be leaned on in the red zone or in key situations as a veteran that people just trust because this guy doesn't fumble the ball. But that doesn't mean that a 5th round rookie can't eventually see a larger role. And once he does, whether it's week 1 or week 5 or 6, he's going to start to become that hot waiver wire ad. Just add him to your bench. Why have a backup quarterback or backup tight end? Drop those dudes, add a guy like Tyron Tracy. And you also want to be making sure that you have Ty Chandler on your roster, because he's somehow currently available, as I make this video and record, in 65% of fantasy leagues, even though he's arguably the number 1 or one of the top breakout candidates in all fantasy football. Look, over Ty Chandler's final 8 games last season, he had a top 30 RB finish in 50% of his games. But now he goes outside of like the top 55 backs in drafts, and he's available, like I said, in 65% of fantasy leagues. Even though once he started to actually play last year, like in week 15 against the Bengals when he got his first start, he put up over 27 fantasy points, over 132 yards on the ground, 25 in the air. This is a guy who is a young back. He's extremely quick. He has 4.38 speed, and when given opportunities, whether it's college or the NFL, he's always paid off. Now, the reason why he's available in so many leagues is because the Minnesota Vikings signed Aaron Jones, their division rival from the Green Bay Packers, the day after he was cut. But they gave him $7 million guaranteed, so it's a 1-year deal. It's all fully guaranteed here for Aaron Jones. But here's the thing. Aaron Jones last year was a very productive player when he was actually out there and on the field. This is a guy who, if we scroll to what he did for the Green Bay Packers, averaged 110 yards per game his final 5 games of the season, including the postseason, and still averaged 5.2 yards per touch last year, which is quality. He was an effective back in terms of production per touch, but here's the thing. Just 30th in broken tackle rate, just 38th in breakaway run rate. These are stats that usually are much higher for Aaron Jones, but it makes sense. He battled injuries. He's now approaching 30 years old, and usually when you start to slip in some of these broken tackle rate metrics, your efficiency, it doesn't come back as you get older. And not to mention, Aaron Jones' backfield competition last year was A.J. Dillon and an undrafted rookie in Emmanuel Wilson. Not tough competition compared to this year what he'll have in Ty Chandler. Because Ty Chandler is just going to be so much more difficult competition. First off, he's way more dynamic, as I showed with the speed. 4.38 speed is much more than anything Aaron Jones has ever competed with in terms of home run dynamite ability. Ty Chandler, also like Aaron Jones, was averaging 5 or more yards per touch last year when getting the ball, and he's just a younger player with a way less track record of injuries and workload on him. So when I'm looking at this backfield, the team actually just recently cut Kenny Ngongwu, I believe, on the team, so he's gone. The only competition for Ty Chandler is Aaron Jones. There's like nobody behind him. So if Aaron Jones was to go down, even if Jones doesn't go down, I think Chandler has a really good role. But if Aaron Jones was to go down, this is a situation where Ty Chandler can take on a full workload, like he did in week 15 last year when Cam Akers was out for the year and Alexander Mattison was hurt, and Ty Chandler put up 150 plus yards. So out of all the guys we talked about in this video, I would say go ahead and get Chuba Hubbard right away first if you can. Assuming that he's already gone, or you want to even add another guy on your team, Ty Chandler, right above my head right here, Mr. Ty Chandler, as of this recording, only rostered in 35% of leagues, available in 65%. If you're holding a backup running back or a backup quarterback or tight end on your team, or like a wide receiver 6, drop those guys and add a guy who can actually break out and win leagues, like a running back like Ty Chandler. Now, the next man I want to talk about is this guy right here, because he's quickly becoming probably the number 1 ad in all of fantasy, and that's Jordan Mason, the San Francisco 49ers' new number 2 running back. And why is he the new number 2 running back on this team, Sal? Well, Elijah Mitchell has been added to the season-ending IR list, so he's going to be done. He had a hamstring issue, so now Jordan Mason looks like the running back 2, and Jordan Mason has already gotten hype this offseason from his own head coach, Kyle Shanahan, as somebody who's taken a step forward, had a nice preseason, and now he looks like the running back 2 behind McCaffrey, who's also dealing with a calf strain. And when we look at this depth chart, McCaffrey, like I said, a calf strain, he's going to be playing week 1. They said he could play right now if he needs to, but there's no doubt about it that if you're dealing with a calf strain right now and not participating in practices, your body could get a little bit stiff, which makes you more susceptible, at least increases the risk maybe by 5, 10, 15% of another strain to your knee, to the same calf, or even to your hamstring or another part of the leg. So that's at least worth keeping in mind, because now Jordan Mason's going to take over as the running back 2, you can see right here, and his only other competition is basically a 4th round pick, Isaac Horrendo, who right now is also also dealing with an injury in camp. Isaac Rendo has been said to by his own coach, Kyle Shanahan, be a raw player. He was a raw prospect coming out of college, so that makes sense. Kind of got hyped up in the draft process because he's a bigger back who ran really fast at the combine. But Jordan Mason is also a bigger back at 223 pounds, has nice bursts. And here's the thing with Jordan Mason. In his limited sample in the NFL in 2 years, averaged 6 yards per carry, 5.2 yards per carry. This is a guy who breaks tackles at will. And again, it's not a big sample, 40 carries and 43 carries, but on 83 carries to average 5.6 yards per carry in your NFL career behind this or in this offensive system in San Francisco, which helps running backs, that's good. You need to be adding Jordan Mason. He's a priority add. And a deeper league add is Emmanuel Wilson, who doesn't even have a photo on Player Profiler because that's how far down the depth charts he was, a 2023 undrafted free agent who had a great preseason and camp last year for the Packers, and the same is happening now this year. And honestly, right now, he might be the running back 2 to start the season. Because almost out of nowhere, there was a surprise that A.J. Dillon landed on the season-ending IR. So he's on the IR. We know Josh Jacobs is the running back 1 on this team. A.J. Dillon's gone, and then they did draft a third-round rookie in Marshawn Lloyd, but here's the deal with Lloyd. To be completely honest with you, Lloyd himself is also dealing with an injury. He had a hip injury to start camp. He's now dealing with a hamstring. He avoided the IR list and the PUP list, so he's going to probably play at some point in the first 4 weeks. It's not a sure thing that he'll play week 1, which means Emmanuel Wilson might be the backup right away. And also, Lloyd has had a terrible camp with multiple injuries and a ton of fumbling problems. There's a chance that Emmanuel Wilson, who this team likes, they kept him on the roster this entire time. He made the team. He could actually be ahead of Marshawn Lloyd, believe it or not. And even if he's not, well, why not just take a flyer on him in your deeper leagues? Now, another guy we have to talk about as now a priority ad because of some of the cut stuff that happened, and that's Jaleel McLaughlin. He's available in over 70% of leagues as of this recording. He's entering his second season, and here's the reason why you want him. The team, the Denver Broncos, as a lot of people suspected, they cut Samaje Perine, the veteran, who's a nice pass protector and pass catcher, and now, again, maybe he could re-sign with the team. I doubt it. He's probably going to go somewhere else, but they cut him. They try to trade him, and now Jaleel McLaughlin's going to have a lot more passing game usage and maybe some early down usage. And this is important because McLaughlin on his limited sample last year was as dynamic as it gets. Number 10 amongst all running backs in yards per touch, averaging over 5 yards per touch. Number 6 in broken tackle rate, so we know he's dynamic in that regard. And then 13th in breakaway run rate of runs of 10 plus yards. And again, this was on a limited sample. He's a second-year player out of Youngstown State. I believe Jaleel McLaughlin has like the college football record for total rushing yards overall, which is just an insane stat to throw out there for a dude, but he is a productive player with some pedigree behind him. And when you look at his competition now, it's going to be obviously Javonte Williams is the starter, but then Audric Estime, a 5th-round rookie. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is ahead of him right now. That was just proven last year based on how dynamic he could be, but these are two completely different backs. McLaughlin's going to be a better pass catcher, can hit home runs. Audric Estime is going to be a power back who wins between the tackles. Kind of like a Javonte Williams, they overlap a little, so maybe if Javonte Williams goes down, Estime takes on that early down role, but either way, I think Jaleel McLaughlin's now in line for maybe 30+% of the snaps here, which in your deeper leagues is important, especially if he starts to earn like 3, 4, 5 targets a game in this offense with Bo Nix at the quarterback who likes to check the ball down based on his college career. So these are the running backs that you should be picking up right now in fantasy football, and a couple of them are absolutely priority ads. But if you want to see these 6 guys, if you still have to draft, at least one fantasy team you probably do, the 6 guys who are must-have running backs this year, well, check out this beautiful video right here. And as I always say, or at least more recently, hey, it might be your favorite video of all time, help you win your league, so you might as well give it a watch. Hit it right there, and I'll see you in the next one.